Hey guys, today's episode is a little different from our past ones. First, today you get just me, Megan. I promise I won't make it too painful. For a while, I've been wanting to do an episode that's less interview, or clearly no interview, and more educational. For a lot of us, sports and athletics are fun and something we partake in regularly, but we don't always live and breathe them. We have jobs, we have families, we have hobbies, we have life, and we may know enough to be dangerous, but we could also use a deep dive into certain topics. So starting with this episode, I'm going to, every once in a while, do an episode on a certain topic. Just me, my own experiences, and let's be honest, a lot of research. It's fun for me, but more importantly, I hope you end these episodes with more info and knowledge on these topics and can take some of it back into your own world. They'll be fun, hopefully a little informative, and have a few spicy takes that you can fight me on. So with that, let's get into today's episode and our first of this kind, cancel culture and comeback stories. Let's start with a familiar moment. It's late at night, or maybe you've just woken up. A video hits social media. A screenshot starts circulating. A news alert comes across your phone. Someone posts, "Has anyone seen this?" Or "What the hell?" Within a few hours, it's everywhere. Talk shows are interrupting with breaking news to dissect it. People are arguing and speculating in comment sections and Reddit threads. The group chat is going off the rails. And within hours, the same questions start bouncing around. Is this career ending? What the hell happened? Are they done? We've all watched this cycle play out with CEOs, with celebrities, with famous leaders. I've not only watched it happen, I've been there, behind the scenes, sometimes holding the proverbial puppet strings that make the news, well, news. But tech CEOs and celebrities are not the only ones who go through it. An athlete messes up. Tiger Woods, Lance Armstrong, Marion Jones, O.J. Simpson, Oscar Pistorius, Pete Rose, Tonya Harding. Sometimes they disappear overnight, and we never really hear from them again. Other times, they come back with a full redemption tour. Primetime cable interviews, emotional videos, features and documentaries about the incident or what went wrong and their resilience and their newfound humility. So why do certain athletes or coaches get another shot while others vanish? I'm here to tell you it's due to how owners, managers, coaches, and even us as fans can answer the following 4 questions. First, what is the scandal? Is it performance-related, personal misconduct, or criminal behavior? Next, how talented and popular is the person involved? Are they a superstar or more of a bench player? And are they male or female? Third, did they apologize? And if they did, was it genuine or more of a legal apology? And was that apology public or was it only behind closed doors? And finally, what is or was the fan response? Are fans only outraged on social media? Are they still willing to pay money to see that person or that team? The key thing to remember is in most cases, one question will not derail someone's reputation. Even in situations with criminal behavior, a comeback is still possible and has happened. But as we'll see, those cases happened because all the other factors were positive. Now, I'm not an athlete or coach, so you may be saying, how does she know this? I spent 17 years in public relations in corporate America. I led communications and reputation for major tech and aerospace companies. I have written crisis and comms plans for plane crashes and CEO transitions and layoffs and really pissed off customers and bankruptcies and floods and a whole lot more that I'm probably forgetting about right now. I know firsthand that when someone gets into trouble, there is an entire team behind the scenes working toward one of 2 predetermined goals: rehabilitating that individual's reputation, and by proxy, the team's reputation, the company's reputation, you get the picture, or cutting them loose and letting everyone, the media, the fans, the critics, be the judge, jury, and executioner. No matter which goal these internal teams are working toward, I promise you, everything you see or don't see is all in alignment with that goal. It's rarely chaos, even if it looks like it from the outside. So in this episode, we're going to break down each of those 4 questions, and through those lenses, look at a few well-known but different examples where an athlete or coach messed up and explore why they were or weren't able to return. Some of these you know, some of these you definitely know, and some you may have forgotten, which, as we'll see, may have been the goal all along. The question that is immediately asked by fans and management alike is the most important one. How serious is the infraction? There are 3 types of reputational scandals in sports. The first are performance scandals. This involves performance-enhancing drugs, gambling, etc. These often have sharp, immediate reactions and consequences, especially in today's culture, but they are some of the easiest to recover from with the right plan and some time, largely because they only involve one individual, the person participating in the act. It's very easy for others, even teams or clubs, to distance themselves from this type of scandal without too much scrutiny, and it's easy to keep the focus solely on the wrongdoings of the person in the hot seat. Look at former New York Yankees shortstop Alex Rodriguez. Despite publicly saying multiple times in the mid-2000s that he had never used performance-enhancing drugs, investigations revealed he had tested positive during his time playing for the Texas Rangers. Eventually, Rodriguez did admit to using banned substances from 2001 to 2003 due to what he called, quote, an enormous amount of pressure to perform. Additionally, he reportedly received HGH between 2010 and 2012, which ultimately led to his suspension for the 2014 season. Since then, he's had high-profile relationships, become a studio analyst for Fox Sports. He starred in commercials, he was nominated for an Emmy, and has had a documentary produced about him. So, yes, his reputation struggled during the investigations and during the appeals of his drug use. But he's bounced back to even higher levels than when he was an active player. The second type of scandal is personal misconduct. This is something like cheating, inappropriate adult relationships, theft, fraud, those sorts of things. The difference between this one and performance is that these scandals don't interfere with the athlete's ability to play the game or a coach's ability to win. Depending on the nature of the misconduct and the severity of it, these can also be easy to come back from, but they often linger on someone's reputation, even if that person bounces back. Think of Tom Brady's Deflategate back in 2015. There were lots of arguments on whether or not Brady knew or even requested Patriots employees deflate footballs below the required pound per square inch levels. But regardless, Brady eventually served a 4-game suspension based on his involvement and his accused failure to cooperate with investigators. At the time, the NFL's executive vice president of football operations stated in a letter to Brady that his actions, quote, clearly constituted conduct detrimental to the integrity of and public confidence in the game of professional football. The initial reaction to Deflategate was extremely strong, and in both directions. Some media outlets were calling for the entire Patriots team to be disqualified from Super Bowl 49. Others called it a phony scandal. And of course, Tom Brady, while still synonymous with Deflategate, remember, these types of scandals can leave a more lasting mark. He went on to win additional Super Bowls and MVP awards. He's become a commentator for NFL on Fox, and he's a partial owner for the Las Vegas Raiders. So, yeah, he's doing pretty good, I'd say. The third type of scandal involves criminal behavior. And just like it sounds, these are scandals that involve breaking the law. They also involve personal misconduct because that misconduct is what led to the illegal activity, which makes them the hardest to navigate from a reputation standpoint because you're dealing with both issues. And frankly, with criminal issues, you're dealing with all three. You're usually dealing with performance, personal misconduct, and a legal issue. But like everything, it depends. An athlete or coach getting a DUI on an otherwise clean record, where thankfully no one was harmed, may only have a small blip on their reputation, if that. Serious crimes like domestic abuse, sexual assault, and murder are almost always impossible to come back from. Think of maybe the biggest example, O.J. Simpson. Now, O.J. wasn't playing in the NFL when he was arrested and tried for the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. But after his acquittal, his reputation was irreversibly destroyed. He went from being a beloved sports icon and actor to widely believed guilty of brutal murder. His former team, the Buffalo Bills, has adopted a strategy of silence and micro moves when it comes to his legacy. For example, they left his name on the interior wall of Highmark Stadium after the acquittal. But it remains to be seen what will happen to his name in the new stadium when it opens later this year. His number, 32, has never officially been retired from the Bills. But they never asked him to participate in the Legend of the Game program either. This is where former players would come back to home games to rile up the crowd minutes before kickoff. The Bills' social media accounts haven't publicly referenced Simpson since 2014 either. So Simpson's attempts to rebuild his image were done without the support of the Bills and without the support of the NFL. So as you can see, the nature of the incident that causes the scandal very much drives the chances that the person will return to glory. To show all this in action, let's look at a recent example. Former University of Michigan head football coach Sharon Moore. For those that don't know, Moore joined the Michigan football team and the football program in 2018 as the tight ends coach. Within a few years, he had been promoted twice, and his work on the offensive side of the ball helped Michigan go on an unprecedented run of success that included 3 consecutive Big Ten championships and the 2023 national title. When head coach Jim Harbaugh announced in January 2024 that he was leaving U of M to become the head coach of the Los Angeles Chargers, the university wasted no time naming Moore as their new head coach. With that move, Moore became the first African-American head coach in the history of U of M's football program. By the end of the 2025 season, Moore had a 17-5 record and was one of the highest paid and most visible figures in college football. That all changed on December 10th, 2025. That afternoon, the University of Michigan announced that it had fired Moore for cause, saying that an internal investigation had found, quote, credible evidence that he had engaged in an inappropriate relationship with a staff member. Late that evening, as the internet was going wild with rumors and speculation and opinions on Moore's firing, it was also released that Moore had been booked into the Washtenaw County Jail in Michigan. He was eventually charged with third-degree home invasion, stalking, and breaking and entering the apartment of that same staff member involved in the investigation. So, within 3 days, Moore went from a major Power 5 head coach preparing for a bowl game to being fired for cause, arrested, and facing felony charges. Can he come back from this? Well, let's go back to the questions. Looking at the 3 types of scandals, he clearly falls into both criminal behavior and personal misconduct. In Moore's corner for possible redemption, I believe, is performance. He is male, he is a historic hire, and he had a winning head coach record. Going against him is what appears to be a lack of public apology and no admission of wrongdoing. It's been widely reported that both Moore and the staffer repeatedly denied their affair to university investigators, and the affair was only confirmed when the staffer decided to come clean a few days before Moore's firing. So while we don't have all the specifics, to me, that heavily implies that Moore had no remorse for his actions. Peer support for Moore has also been largely missing since the firing was made public. In the days following his firing and then arrest, both current U of M football players and recruits publicly expressed shock and disappointment, as did many university students. Jim Harbaugh even made a short but neutral comment to the public on the incident. I don't know of anyone who has supported Moore publicly over his arrest, but rumors have been rampant that many insiders knew the affair was happening and that players would talk about it during team workouts. It was an open secret, according to a lot of folks. If that's true, that tells me that Moore had private support and maybe even folks willing to stand up for him if his situation had only involved the firing. There have also been reports that Moore had ongoing mental health struggles and that the university had been alerted to those issues prior to his firing. Whether that's accurate or just a well-placed theory intended to soften his reputational downfall, I don't know. But if more information is released, I won't be surprised if at least a few people in his circle come out in support of him. Finally, there's the fan reaction. There's been no fan outrage against his arrest. But again, his firing and the reasons for it have been somewhat hotly contested on social media. You have fans in support and others wondering if Moore was made the sacrificial lamb, a sort of public atonement for other more serious issues facing the university and its athletics program. That said, there's been no call to boycott the team or the upcoming football season, no loss in consumer ticket revenue, and Michigan's new coach, Kyle Whittingham, has been well received by fans and alumni alike. Do I think Moore can come back from this? Yes. His legal issues need to resolve, and depending on the outcome of that, it may take a few years. But if he stays quiet during that time, a well-done Netflix documentary or ESPN interview where he speaks well, owns his actions, shows remorse and vulnerability, all that can absolutely put the wheels back in motion. In fact, I fully expect him to join a coaching staff within the next 5 years, probably somewhere outside of the Midwest. And if that team has success, fans are going to be saying, wait, isn't he that guy from U of M? Good for him for turning it around. After you know the type of scandal, the next question you should ask is all about talent. We like to believe accountability is evenly applied. We like to believe that consequences match behavior, but decades of organizational research on performance bias say otherwise. A 2019 study published in Personnel Psychology found that high performers are up to 40% more likely to be given second chances after misconduct than average performers. It shouldn't surprise you that elite performance buys patience, period. That's true for CEOs as well as athletes and coaches. So let's look at two different examples that show what happens when you are wildly successful and when you aren't. On the night of November 26, 2009, most Americans were happily recovering from Thanksgiving dinner. Not Tiger Woods. At the time, Woods was widely considered the greatest golfer of all time. He was a multiracial superstar in a historically white sport. Since 1999, not a year had gone by without him winning at least one major golf championship. He'd been photographed with President Obama, and just weeks earlier had been named by Forbes as the first athlete ever to earn $1 billion. Much of that money came from endorsements from major brands like Nike and Gatorade. Now, on that day, Woods and his wife, Elin Nordegren, were hosting Thanksgiving dinner at their home in Florida, near Orlando. The day before, U.S. publication The National Enquirer had released a screaming headline, Tiger Woods cheating scandal. Inside was an article detailing a months-long affair between Woods and New York City nightclub hostess Rachel Uchitel. According to reports, Nordegren read the Enquirer article and was shocked by some of the details, including one that Woods had met up with Uchitel just months after the birth of their son. That Thanksgiving night, after Woods had taken an Ambien and fallen asleep, Nordegren reportedly looked through his phone and found a text from her husband to Uchitel, claiming she was the only one he's ever loved. It was now 1 a.m. on November 27th. Nordegren lost it. Waking up Woods, who, still woozy from the Ambien, locked himself in the bathroom. What resulted was chaos. At one point, Nordegren supposedly threw Woods' phone at him, chipping his tooth. A physical argument ensued, and when Woods got away, Nordegren grabbed a golf club and began chasing him. Woods got into his car, while she climbed into a golf cart. He pulled out of his driveway, but he didn't make it very far before careening into a curb, hitting a fire hydrant, and crashing into a tree. Nordegren told police it was a car accident. Media speculation, which had been simmering because of the Enquirer article, heightened incredibly within 24 hours of his release from the hospital. On November 29th, 2 days after the crash, Woods issued a statement taking full responsibility for the crash, but said the rumors surrounding his infidelity were irresponsible, false, and unfounded. His claims of innocence didn't last a week. After texts and voicemails from another woman were leaked, Woods released his written statement 2 days later, admitting he had let his family down and apologizing for his transgressions, but also saying he was dismayed by the extent of the tabloid scrutiny. The damage, unfortunately, kept coming. Within 2 weeks of the accident, 14 other women had come forward, admitting to having affairs with Woods. Those major brand sponsors all canceled their contracts with him. Woods is reported to have told a friend shortly after the accident that he needed to, quote, run to Zales and get a Kobe special. I need a house on a finger. Eventually, on February 19th, 2010, almost 3 months after the accident, Woods spoke directly to reporters for the first time and publicly apologized to his family and his fans. He also checked himself into a sex rehabilitation facility. Though a handful of sponsors continued to drop him after his public apology, no new information on the scandal garnered as much attention as that initial crash and aftermath. He began to slowly grant interviews. He made his way back into the golf circuit. And in March 2012, a little over 2 years after the scandal broke, Woods won at Bay Hill, his first PGA Tour win since the incident. Newspaper headlines and social media declared, "Tiger is back," signaling restored confidence in not only his abilities, but his character. So looking at the criteria, this was largely a personal misconduct with a small criminal behavior aspect. Woods was fined $164 by police for careless driving during his crash. Woods was arguably the most successful athlete at the time and is still considered the most talented golfer to ever play the game. After the incident, Nielsen reported that when Woods wasn't playing at a televised tournament, viewership would drop as much as 50%. His initial statement did deny any wrongdoing and put ownership of the chaos on the media, which is a sin in the crisis comms world. But slowly, his subsequent statements leaned further into all-out apology. He used mortification statements, he apologized to family and fans, he promised to do better, and he asked for redemption. And it worked. Online conversations about him began to return to normal by mid-March 2010. In fact, when Woods was involved in another car crash, this time in February 2021, public and fan sentiment barely even mentioned his 2009 scandal. Why do I think he was able to come back? To me, it boils down to his performance and his apologies, which we're going to get to. That's it. We don't want to believe our heroes are flawed, especially when they are considered the greatest in their sport. So we actively look for any evidence that a scandal involving them is an exception. While I would have had Woods apologize from the jump, his willingness to publicly apologize on several different occasions stopped a lot of that reputational bleeding. And it has to be recognized that Woods is male. Male athletes and figures have a far easier path back from the brink because, unlike women, criticism lodged at men stops short of vilifying their behavior. Just look at the criticism the U.S. women's soccer team received in 2019 after their so-called wild celebrations during a World Cup match. Or when Serena Williams received both a point penalty for smashing her racket and a game penalty for yelling at the umpire during the September 2018 U.S. Open. Both actions male tennis players are rarely penalized for. And then there's Tonya Harding, a case I personally was obsessed with back in 1994. Just ask my parents. By many definitions, Harding was a success. She won the Skate America competition in 1989. She was the 1991 and 1994 U.S. champion, and she was the 1991 world silver medalist. She was a 2-time Olympian. She could bench press over her body weight and was the first woman to land the triple axel jump in international competition. In fact, she wasn't just the first woman to land it, she was also the first woman to ever successfully execute 2 triple axels in a single competition, and the first ever to complete a triple axel in combination with another move. She did it with a double toe loop. Of course, we all know what happened in early January 1994. Harding's rival, skater Nancy Kerrigan, was attacked a day before the U.S. Figure Skating Championships. The assailant, who was contracted to break her right knee, ended up only severely bruising her leg. In the days after the attack, Harding publicly denied involvement, but the arrests of several of those in her close circle caused almost immediate doubt of her statements. At the end of January, Harding held a press conference to read a prepared statement where she said she was sorry Kerrigan was attacked and claimed to have no advance knowledge of the plot to attack her. But Harding did take responsibility for failing to report things about the assault after it happened. After the 1994 Olympics, Harding pled guilty to conspiracy to hinder prosecution and negotiated a plea bargain that required her to resign from the U.S. Figure Skating Association. Harding's case is a rare combination of all three scandals. Her actions directly impacted, maybe even improved, her ability to perform. She faced claims that she fraudulently used figure skating monies to finance the assault, and she was found guilty of a felony offense. While her performance could be inconsistent, I'll say that, she was still often ranked in the top 10 in her sport. She has given several public apologies to Kerrigan, including one to her face during a joint interview in 1998, although she's never apologized for involvement, but just for the attack overall. She's long been skewered and defended by the public. Phil Knight, the CEO of Nike, donated $25,000 toward her legal fees in 1994. And many people feel that Harding received unfair scoring treatment while she was an active skater because judges at the time wanted princesses in figure skating, not athletes. I think what's made Harding such a fitful comeback story is her inability to perform after the scandal broke, and the widely suspected fact that despite apologizing for the attack happening, she's always known more than she's let on. On the former, most athletes who were at the top of their game and faced a scandal were able to come back to that same sport, but Harding's ban made that impossible. And while she tried other sports like boxing, it was clear that her talent lied in figure skating. Her inability to win created a large hole in any comeback strategy, despite successes in other areas, like placing third on Dancing with the Stars and setting a land speed record in a vintage gas coupe. What I also find really fascinating about her story is that those in her circle, including Kerrigan and those with more involvement in the attack, have spoken out in public support of her. She's had specials dedicated to her. She had an award-winning movie. And yet, she's still synonymous with that scandal and not her athletic abilities. She bucks that performance bias, and to a degree, rightfully so. So it's no secret that female athletes face higher levels of public scrutiny. What's more, while the women's sports market is actually growing faster than men's, television coverage and highlights still focus predominantly on male sports. So there's little room for women to build a fan base that will defend them if or when a scandal breaks. That disparity in coverage also gives them less social capital, meaning one misstep is much more detrimental to their reputation than for men. But talent and gender only get you to the starting line of a comeback. Once the world knows who you are and what you're capable of, there's something that can either douse the flames or fan them into a forest fire: the apology. The next question to ask is, did the person apologize? And if so, was it just enough to protect themselves, or did it have real ownership? In my experience and opinion, an apology or lack of one won't solely determine if you come back or stay exiled. But it is the sole factor that determines how long you're out in the cold for. It's mutually exclusive. The longer you wait to apologize, the longer you're in exile. Let's look at people who just refused to apologize. Sometimes, I'm betting that's for legal reasons. Certainly, O.J. Simpson could have come out and apologized for murdering 2 people, but that would have likely opened up other legal doors that would get him in hot water. I imagine it's a similar issue with Tonya Harding. Sometimes the lack of apology is because the person firmly believes they did nothing wrong. Going back to the University of Michigan, Jim Harbaugh has consistently denied ever knowing anything about the scouting and sign-stealing operation run by former staffer Connor Stalions. He's refused to apologize and has maintained that he did nothing wrong. I think by moving on to a new organization, he has managed to avoid a full-out cancellation, but I suspect that's more of a delayed reaction than anything else. If his time with the Chargers ends poorly or with a losing record, I think his lack of apology for the U of M actions will quiet any real future opportunities until he comes clean about what he really knew. Then there are legal apologies. In these cases, people do apologize to some extent, but never really take responsibility for the impact of their actions. Consider former U.S. Olympian swimmer Ryan Lochte. A 12-time Olympic medalist, he is the third most decorated swimmer in Olympic history. His 7 individual Olympic medals rank second in history in men's swimming, behind only Michael Phelps. He still holds the world records in the 4x200 meter freestyle. He has won 90 medals in major international competition. But he brought a scandal upon himself at the 2016 Summer Olympics in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, when he claimed that he and 3 other American swimmers had been pulled over and robbed by armed men with police badges. After the incident garnered international attention and multiple investigations were conducted by the Brazilian Tourist Police, the U.S. Olympic Committee Security, the State Department, and the FBI, it came out that the real situation was an incident at a nearby gas station where the U.S. athletes vandalized a bathroom while intoxicated. Lochte eventually apologized for what he called his immature decisions and admitted he was drunk, but also said that everyone was blowing it out of proportion. Lochte's reported favorability rating changed from 90% positive before the incident to 70% negative after. Or consider the 2017 and 2018 Houston Astros organization and their own sign-stealing scandal. While multiple players and Astros owner eventually did apologize for their role in the scheme, fans to this day feel the apologies were a bare minimum, and that some of the players and staff felt they weren't even really necessary since the World Series title remained intact. Why? Well, for starters, the public apologies didn't come until February 2020, and only after the MLB released its investigation report. That part is likely due to the legal strategy and investigation, so while I side-eye it, I understand the timing and what was likely them following advice from general counsel. The apologies were also widely criticized for being prepared statements, which, to me, is also unfair. Many of the examples we've already talked about included prepared statements as part of their strategy, so I don't think it's fair to say someone is or isn't genuinely remorseful based on if they spoke freely or if they just read a written statement. But where criticism is valid is that these statements from Astros players didn't provide any real in-depth details. Some of the apologies even flat out contradicted each other. Third baseman and shortstop Carlos Correa admitted that the cheating gave the team an advantage, while Astros owner Jim Crane initially tried to claim it didn't, and that the team won the World Series solely because of the talent of the players. Genuine apologies, to no surprise, those are the ones that move the needle when it comes to public forgiveness. They're also the rarest. To me, Tiger Woods' public apology in front of reporters in February 2010 was a genuine apology. It may have taken him some time and, let's be honest, some legal and PR counsel to get him there, but he owned his mistakes and their impact. I firmly believe that without that apology, he would be living in golf purgatory right now. Another example is Mike Tyson's apology after what may be the strangest thing to ever happen during a boxing match: biting off a chunk of Evander Holyfield's ear. Tyson's initial apology, given just days after the fight, showed mortification, deference, and a bias toward action. In it, he called that night the worst night of his professional career, said he was wrong, that he wouldn't stand for insulting comments toward Holyfield, and that he had reached out to medical professionals for help. So, yes, apology flavors vary. The ones that are most successful, the ones that cut down the time it will take to get back on the top, are the ones that are action-oriented and aim to correct the behavior rather than just offer an excuse. They admit the facts, acknowledge the impact, and lay out a plan to correct any future behavior. I'll also admit that sometimes apologies are well-crafted and well-written and well-said, but that doesn't mean the person feels remorseful. A good apology doesn't have to be good to work. It just has to give audiences permission to ease up and look the other way. An apology isn't a monologue. At the end of the day, it's a negotiation between the person and the fans hold the ultimate power. We are the audience that decides if the debt has been paid or if we're willing to stop collecting interest because we want to see our team on top again. So let's look at the final and most uncomfortable piece of the reputation puzzle: us. As fans, we don't just observe accountability. We participate in it. We amplify outrage, we pick up our pitchforks, we Monday morning quarterback, and then we move on. We forgive when it's convenient. And in a lot of cases, we don't cancel people, we just rotate villains. We tell not only ourselves, but leadership that we care about honor and integrity. And in a few cases, we do. But in my opinion, those cases are the extremes. The ones where showing support for the individual makes us look bad. The Larry Nassers, the Jerry Sandusky's, the Pete Roses, or the 1919 White Sox. But in most cases, we say we want accountability, and then the athlete or coach scores, or they follow all the steps I mentioned above, like a good apology and a nice documentary. Maybe they stay on the down low for a few months or years. And suddenly, we're back, cheering them on. A classic case of this: Michael Vick. What was the first thing that came to your mind when I said his name just there? Dogfighting? Injured animals? Animal cruelty? I'll admit that I haven't followed Vick since his prison sentence in 2007. So I was surprised to learn when researching this episode that after serving 21 months in federal prison, he signed with the Philadelphia Eagles and stayed in the NFL until 2017. And not only that, he earned the Comeback Player of the Year award and a Pro Bowl selection in 2010. And he's now the head football coach at Norfolk State in Virginia. So social media platforms like X and Instagram and TikTok have shortened our attention spans, sure, but they've also accelerated our judgment cycles. Certainly, Michael Vick has avoided all of that, even if he did have a fairly robust judgment cycle early in his sentence. And all of those clicks, those comments, all of that engagement, it matters. It matters to teams, it matters to players, and it's measured. There's that age-old saying that bad press is still press, and that's still true, especially in sports, because as fans, we give the ones who make the decisions mixed signals. We say to get rid of someone, but we continually engage in the dialogue around them. The team, the people, they all become headliners. And it's not always great brand awareness, but it is awareness. And in a lot of cases, that awareness brings in money. And money, well, that's the real driver of everything we've been talking about. The National Football League, the National Basketball Association, Major League Baseball, they are all here for our entertainment. These are multi-billion-dollar businesses. The NFL's total revenue for the 2024-2025 fiscal year surpassed $23 billion. They are the world's most lucrative professional league. The NBA surpassed $12 billion in total revenue last season and is expected to generate $14.3 billion in revenue during this current season. The National Hockey League even is experiencing a revenue surge with record sponsorship and higher attendance, and it's driving the league to a projected $7 billion for this current season. Now, consider that I said the entire women's sports market is growing. In fact, it's growing 4.5 times faster than that of men's sports, and yet they bring in significantly less. According to an August 2025 study conducted by McKinsey, women's sports could generate at least $2.5 billion in the U.S. alone by 2030, but it's not there yet. And that's part of the reason, going back to earlier, that female athletes have smaller and less frequent roads to redemption. So when the controversy hits, let's be honest, none of these leagues start with an ethics training. They start with a spreadsheet. What are sponsors saying? What's trending online? What are fans saying? Will fans still show up? Will fans still buy a jersey? If you remember nothing from this episode, remember this: winning shortens memories. Morning Consult data shows that among sports fans, nearly 60% say they're willing to support an athlete again if that athlete's performance improves, even after a serious controversy. Going back to Tom Brady and Deflategate, during that time, Brady's jersey sales spiked spiked. No football, pun intended. According to Fanatics, his merchandise jumped more than 20% during that period. Fans weren't abandoning Brady. They were spending more to defend him. And that willingness to spend money to continue to support the team and show up to games and matches, that is all factored in. And I'm not saying that the outrage doesn't matter. And whether we like it or not, fans help decide who gets forgiven. Maybe we need to be taking that responsibility much more seriously. So where does this all leave us? If all of this is something you've never thought of before, maybe it will leave you with this. Comebacks aren't accidents, and they aren't miracles. They're strategy. They are meticulously crafted campaigns designed to test the temperature of the outrage. And whether we like it or not, fans help decide who gets forgiven. It is okay to be a fan of someone who is flawed. I'm not advocating that all our sports heroes should be perfect because everyone makes mistakes. And certainly, the pressure to perform and win at those levels is something I will never know or experience. I'm not here to convince you to find that perfect idol that will never let you down. Rather, I'm asking you to do this. The next time an athlete disappears or reappears, ask yourself, why? What did they do? Did they break a law or an internal policy? Were they a star player? Did they apologize? Did others stand up for them? How much time went by between the first news alert and now? What are people saying on social media about them? Was their apology for us or for sponsors? All those questions will tell you a lot more about who that person really is. Because all of those things matter. And you'd better believe that every comms team, every club owner, every general manager is paying attention to those exact same answers. At the end of the day, I'm not sure the sports industry has a moral compass, but I know for a fact it has a ledger. And as long as we keep providing the profit, they'll keep providing the redemption stories. So go out there and be a fan, but maybe be a slightly more skeptical one. Thanks for spending time with us in the middle. If today's story caught your attention, drop a subscribe, share the episode, follow us on social media, and remember, it ain't over till it's over.